Have you ever wondered what it would be like to live on another planet? It's something that I had never thought about, but it's exactly what I felt like I experienced after losing Lance. We had been isolated for so many years, and the world changed so much during that time. I did not recognize it. We had access to the same technology that everyone else did, but there was no reason to use it because Lance had dementia and he needed things to be familiar and comfortable to him. So we basically lived in a previous decade as far as technology was concerned. Well, as far as most things were concerned. We listened to music on iPods, and we mostly stuck with music that Lance was comfortable with. When I moved after he died, I had no idea how to even find new music. I didn't even know where to begin. It was overwhelming. I bought a new car just before we put him on hospice because I didn't need the van anymore. And because I had barely spent any time inside that car, it took me about 3 years to learn the technology in my car because I wasn't driving it. In 2022, I flew for the first time in 9 years. And I remember getting to the gate and sitting in my seat, waiting for the plane to board. And I looked around, and there was not another person talking to another human being. Everybody was staring at their screens. And I was just dumbfounded what had happened to the world because the last time I had flown, the airport was a bustle of activity and it was loud because people were talking. This was like being in a library. It was the strangest thing. But what really bothered me was I had been isolated for so many years. I was ready to start talking to people again. And suddenly the whole world had lost interest in communicating with people in person. When I got on the plane, I was the only person in my area that didn't have headphones or AirPods or earbuds or whatever they were. I didn't even know what they were. I didn't even have any for my phone. I had no reason to use them. So I sat on that plane basically feeling like I was by myself because everybody was tuned into their phones. Sometime after that trip, I realized that I was experiencing reverse culture shock.
Crazy, crazy, crazy. That's so wild for me to think through sort of landing on this alien planet of a lack of in-person communication and an increase of technology without a really well-developed understanding of what's going on around you. I think there are people, probably a very, very small percentage of people who have resisted technology and exist in this modern space, um, maybe still acting like they have for the last 10 or 15 years, but that's by choice. It's not, it wasn't an accident, right? They made those conscious choices to avoid technology. That wasn't the case for you. It had just passed you by while you were caring for Lance, and now suddenly you were kind of dropped on your head. And wow, wow.
Right. It was so weird. And it's still shocking to me at times when I get out and I'm at a restaurant and I see people sitting across from each other, both of them on their phones. I would have never done that. I don't know. I mean, it just to me it's just so strange. And when I tell people about it, they look at me like I'm the weird one because this is just the norm for everybody. But from 2010 to 2020, we were very isolated and I didn't keep up with all the technology and I wasn't around other people except for at the hospital, at the gym, or when we went traveling and or the grocery store. But those are all places where you're not really tied to your phone. So it was really shocking to me.
When you realized that the world had moved on and left you behind, so to speak, do you think that made your grief process more intense or maybe different? Do you think it added to the the grief that you were experiencing from the loss of your husband, but also realizing, oh, I've lost a decade? Did that contribute to that at all?
It did. It did for sure. But what it also did was it made me feel like I've got a lot of catching up to do. Oh my gosh, I better get busy. So I have really immersed myself in a lot of things just so that I can get back up to speed because I feel like, and I've said this before, I said this in the last episode, that I felt like a child having to relearn everything. And it's just such a strange feeling as an adult in my 50s having to learn things that everybody already knows that's my age.
Do you think also, because as you were saying that, I was thinking about, I've removed myself from social media for all intents and purposes. I don't get on it anymore. And that was by choice because it was becoming so overwhelming to me that I just couldn't, I needed to just take it out of my life for some, like some peace. It was something that needed to be removed. Do you feel like not having the creep of technology in your life, so that that slow drip of almost like addiction or dependency that happens over time, do you feel like because you didn't have that, you were in a better place to be able to pick and choose how much of that you want to bring into your life so you can get up to speed, but also look at things with maybe a more objective um, point of view and say, I don't want that. I'm not going to adopt that piece of it. Is that giving you more power in that area?
I do feel like it's made me more aware of what I'm doing. If I get stuck scrolling on my phone, I I notice it and I set my phone down. I've actually set timers on my phone to keep me from doing that because I don't like it. I don't like how it makes me feel. And I do think that it's different for me because I didn't fall into that pattern like everyone else did.
That's it. I think that's such an a valid point, because as much as we criticize people for being on their phones, as I think as a society we talk about it and we criticize people for it, and yet we all do it. So it's it's like everybody's kind of in the same boat. So I think your perspective is really good, that you can say, I don't like how that makes me feel, so I'm going to make the choice to put that aside and not get into that. And maybe there's a space for like the silver lining of the being dumped into the alien planet is you didn't go through that, kind of inoculation of little bits, little bits, little bits, little bits until you're just, drowning in technology and social media and all those things. So maybe that's the silver lining of that, um, of just of that circumstance, like you said, of maybe the rude awakening.
Well, I think part of it for me too is that I was isolated for so many years and we were indoors a lot. So by the time he passed away, I was so tired of being indoors. I wanted to do anything but be inside. I wanted to be out in nature. I wanted to feel the sunshine. I wanted to go for drives. Well, I want to go for drives now. I didn't in the beginning, but the phone is not a part of that. So I just it's just another way that I feel like I'm so different. I just if I didn't have a phone, I don't think that I would even care, except that I need my calendar.
I wanted to say one other thing about your airport experience, because as it turns out, I work in an airport, so I see this all the time. I see it every day, and it's sometimes shocking to look around and see, 50, 60, 80, 100 people in your immediate vicinity, and a dozen of them are having conversations. Everyone else is just looking down. And I said I cut out social media, so I don't I don't see really anything that's going on in anyone's lives, including my own immediate family. And one of the benefits to that I've found is that I get to catch up when I see people around town, out in the grocery store, at the gym, at the airport, wherever I see them. I get to catch up on their lives. And it's so fun to genuinely ask, what have you been up to? What's going on? That I've enjoyed so much. It's kind of encouraged me to continue along this path. And I think you experience that wanting to chat with strangers or get to know people or just participate in society. And all of a sudden, nobody does that anymore because, well, we know everything that's going on with each other.
Right. We're losing the ability to communicate with each other. And it's not a good thing. And I'm feeling it now. I'm working so hard to get back to communicating with people. And I really have to seek out environments where almost where it feels like it's acceptable to do that, which is so strange.
It is strange. And you've done a lot of work, period, in just moving through your grief process, healing, um, just getting back to, well, I wouldn't say getting back to creating the life that you want to live in a really purposeful and intentional way. And so I think you've been a good example to me of being intentional, being purposeful, creating my life instead of just letting it happen to me. And you've done that in a lot of ways, a lot of things that you've adopted or continued with to help you in that process.
I continued with the journaling. I've journaled for years. I talk about that often. I went back to counseling. I found a new counselor after I moved here. And I've done EMDR, which is for my PTSD. And that has helped a lot. That's actually helped me get back to driving again because I wasn't really able to drive very much. It caused a lot of anxiety and stress. And so that's given me a lot more freedom. One of the things was going back to school because Lance got sick so early in our marriage and I hadn't finished school. Every time I tried to go back, something would happen with him. And so I never finished. And so I decided once he died that was one of my first goals was to get back to school and to get some sort of degree. So that was huge. And I struggled a lot with it. I was always a pretty good student. It's a lot harder as you get older, but it's been harder because of I did this about 2.5 years, not quite 2.5 years after he passed away. I started back to school and I was still living in a fog and didn't realize it. The shock had not completely worn off. And so I struggled to get those good grades that I wanted. And I struggled to understand and I struggled to communicate with people. And then I was starting to get back into music. And like I said in the beginning, I didn't know how to find music because I'd been listening to it on my iPod, but that was really hard for me to listen to because it was all the music that Lance and I listened to. And so there was a heaviness to it. And so I had a couple of friends that started introducing me to music that was different than any music that I had ever listened to. And I was so excited about it. And I didn't realize until later, it was months later, what music does to your brain. And I am so glad that I started listening to music when I did, and that the different music creates different pathways in your brain. And it's actually one of the things that has really helped heal my brain and help move me forward. And I notice it now when I start feeling like I'm stuck. I feel like I want to listen to music that I've never listened to before, and I notice a difference. It is the coolest thing.
Very cool. Well, I mean that doesn't surprise me. It's music is so powerful, and I mean there's beyond like the pattern part of it, there's also the complexity part of it. There's also the kind of language, part of it communication, and I think ways to express a thought or a feeling or an emotion in a more complex way than just a straightforward, I'm angry, I'm in love, I'm sad. Like, so expressing something with more depth. And I think feeding that into your brain in the background is going to have, well, I don't think, I know it does have an effect on you. So when you're purposeful and intentional about bringing more kind of abstract things into your brain, I think you're going to grow. That's going to kind of heal and help promote, I would say, more like a higher cognitive function, I would think.
Right. And there are scientific studies to back that up. I'm not a scientist, so I can't point you to anything, but I've listened to several podcasts on it and from scientists, and I've read a lot of papers on it because I was so fascinated by it. And I don't know why it never occurred to me, because music was something that made Lance come alive like nothing else did when he had dementia. And so I don't know why I didn't connect those two things, probably because I lived in a fog. But now looking back, it makes so much sense why music was such a big deal to him. And then one of the other things that I've done is I've traveled a lot in the last 2.5 years. And just doing that has helped heal my brain so much for many different reasons. I mean, I'm facing my fears. I'm putting myself in situations that are unfamiliar. I'm going to places that I've never been before. I'm experiencing cultures that I've never experienced before, and all of that has been such an important part of my healing. And I hope that I can continue doing that.
I think one of the coolest things about traveling, and it doesn't matter if you go halfway across the world or if you go three counties over, it doesn't matter. You're seeing new things, and so your brain is required to pay attention to those things, take in information, and process it. When we stay in the same environment all the time, whether that's um, our commute to work, whether it's just our home, whether it's our neighborhood, the things that we do all the time, we're always those patterns in our lives, we stop paying attention. We stop paying attention. And that's just natural. That's the way that our brain kind of prioritizes what information to pay attention to or not. And when it's seeing the same thing all the time, it doesn't need to be consciously aware of that anymore. And so that's an efficiency mechanism, I think. So I think that's the biggest benefit of travel is being somewhere that you are not familiar with, and your brain has to work overtime to process all that information, not least of all to determine whether or not you're safe. I mean, primarily, I would say your brain is determining whether or not you're safe. And so that at its base is that's a lot of stimulation, right? So you've had to take on some pretty big challenges.
Yeah, it's been exhausting. I still sleep a lot, not as much as I was sleeping in the beginning, but I'll just get to a point where I'm like, okay, I've had so much stimulation. I feel like I'm on information overload a lot because of all the things that I'm doing. And so I have to just take a day and turn my phone off and just stay indoors. Sometimes I'll sit on my deck and just sit out in the sun, but I'm not talking to anybody. I'm just having some quiet time because I am so overstimulated. But still, I wouldn't have it any other way. These are all very important parts to my healing process. And because they're all so different, they're all, I feel like, healing a different part of my brain and just helping me move forward.
I've been very impressed watching you move forward and watching you process your grief. Um, Not ignore it, not try and stuff it down or set it aside, um, but walk through it, process it, feel it, and continue to choose to move forward. So it's been very cool to watch you go through this, and hard sometimes because I can't help. There's nothing I can do. It's something that has to be done on your own, but it's inspiring in a way that I hadn't expected. So I can look to you and say, okay, I watched RuthAnn do this. And so that means that if she's a human and I'm also a human, that there's something in me that could do the same thing. And so it's been inspiring in a way to know that, okay, whatever hardship might come my way, there is a way forward through that and processing that. So I've been very thankful that I've had the opportunity to watch you process grief, um, as, oh my gosh, I don't want to say as well as you have, but that's the best word I can come up with.
Well, I appreciate you being willing to walk through it with me because there are a lot of people who are not willing to do that. And I can't ignore it because if I don't express it, it's still going to be there. So I've got to work through it in some way. And the people who have walked alongside me as I walk this path are just, I don't even know what to say. I would not be where I am without all the support that I've had. And you've played a big role in that, Jenna. And I appreciate it so much. I appreciate you so much.
Well, it's been my honor. And like I said, it's inspired me to continue on and do, hard things and take on challenges. And it's taught me how to be a better friend and supportive um, human to whatever people are going through. So it's funny to me how even the hardest parts of life can turn out to be some of the most valuable.
Right. I feel like that's what I'm experiencing right now. Some of the most valuable parts of life. So, anyway, well, thanks for joining me, Jenna. And I will see you next time.
All right, I'll see you. Bye.